All right, Kevin, back with you with another episode of the $1,000,000 Relationships Podcast. And today I am here with Kimmy Seltzer. Kimmy, welcome. It is so awesome to have you today.
It's so awesome to be here, Kevin. I love what you're about, and I love the show.
I'll tell you, we've probably spent 20 minutes plus sitting here talking before we
I
hit the
know.
record button. So,
Because we're all about building relationships, Kevin,
well,
right?
and the thing is that so I got to give a shout out to Joe, Joe Fire, because he's the one that connected you and I. And I've known Joe for a number of years, and like I was telling you before we hit the record, I met Joe through Joe and I's mutual friend Perry Marshall. And I've known Perry Marshall since 1999. And so anytime you meet somebody through a mutual friend, there is like it is the most enjoyable way to ever meet anybody, because like Kimmy, you and I, we just started talking today like we'd known each other for years, all because we have this mutual friend in Joe who both of us just have so much admiration and respect for. And so, that Joe, shout out to you, because I just really appreciate you, man. And I'm so thankful that you introduced Kimmy and I, and that here we are having this conversation today. And I know we're going to make a good impact from doing what we do today, Kimmy. And so
Yeah.
what I'd like to do is just kind of start off by, letting you talk a little bit about what you do, who you serve, what inspires you most about the work that you get to do, and just kind of start by setting a little bit of context and let everybody know who is Kimmy Seltzer, and what are you all about, Kimmy?
Right. Like who the heck is this lady? Well,
Yeah.
I've gone through some identity crises. You and I talked off air about, first of all, the name. It went through an evolution. But also just like given my background, it really has done a lot of twists and turns over the years. But I call myself these days an authentic dating strategist, a confidence therapist, and an image expert. And that's kind of a mouthful to say that I help people in a holistic way look and feel their best so they attract what they want. And that could be in love and it could be in business. And to me, it's actually all the same. In fact, I'm speaking at a conference this week and speaking to a bunch of entrepreneurs and CEOs of why dating gets to be really hard when you're an entrepreneur, right? Because there's a lot of the stuff that goes on that has to do with the way that we focus on things and commit to things. And, that gets really convoluted when you're an entrepreneur. But I will say, my background is a therapist, and that's really what I was doing for many, many years. And I had my own story happen. And it was funny because I used to think I was really helping people. And I'm sure I did help people, but it wasn't until I had my own adversity, go on. And I know you know some of the watching my TEDx talk that I really like it hit me personally. And I had this journey with what I was going to do and how I was going to serve people and also like help myself in the process. And so that's why I believe in such a holistic approach and helping people. And it really comes down to confidence because at the end of the day, you build your business, you build love based on how you feel about yourself. And when that is missing in different areas of confidence in your life, that's where you start building to like get to where you want to go.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So, after Joe connected you and I found your TEDx talk that you did and stuff. And I remember watching that, and I'm just like, wow, you know what? I just really like this girl, and the way that she shows up, and the way that you just spoke so openly and so candidly about just the good, the bad, and the ugly, all of it, you know. And so, and that just really resonated with me, because I know I was sharing with you
Mhm.
before we started recording that, for most of my life, I was really concerned about what other people thought of me and wanted to show up a certain way. I know this is not an isolated thing. Most people show up this way, concerned about what others think about them. And I'm sure that that is such a big part of the work that you do. is just giving people permission to just show up and be themselves, for crying out loud, and just lift let that weight be gone and just be you, you know? And
Yeah. It
so
sounds so simple, yet it's so complex,
yeah,
right? At the
yeah.
same time. And so, a lot of times people come to me to help them find love. And a lot of times it's in the second act, right? Like if you're over 40, that's something that I really help people with, both men and women. Um, but after we get done working together, and most people do end up finding love, you know what they all say? They say, I know I came to you to find love, but that's not really who I found. I said, "What'd you find?" They say, "I found myself."
Yeah,
And that's really what this is all about, but often you don't think of that when you're going out there and trying to find a partner, necessarily. And to me, it's no different than when you're networking. And that's why a lot of the skills that I help people with, you're going to be building both in, your social life, in your business life, in your dating life. It's all the same. And so I'm very focused on leveraging skills
yeah.
rather than being outcome oriented, because it's the outcome that trips everybody up.
Mhm,
Um
mhm.
and yeah, like I'm happy and thank you for recognizing just the vulnerability in my TEDx talk, because to me, like, cuz I know you do the same in building relationships. The most effective relationships are built on authenticity and vulnerability. And it's not even what you know, but rather if a person likes you, whether or not they're going to move on with you. And that
That's
is
right.
in business and in love. So you could say the most important, smartest things and all the knowledge that you have. But if people don't like you and they don't feel you,
That's right.
then that opportunity might be passed by.
Yeah, totally, totally. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we are definitely in alignment on that stuff, Kimmy. It's
Am I preaching to the choir, right? Well,
yeah.
no, and that's really why I got into what I do. I'll just tell you the quick backstory for your listeners is that, after being a therapist for many years and having this traditional life, we all pick up as a family and we move here to La La Land, and we land here and we do what all the other people here do. We get a divorce. And, I mean, joke, right? Like, obviously, I like to blame LA, but I would have been here anyway, quite honestly. And I realized in that moment that, you know, a lot of issues were surfacing and bubbling up because we were faced with each other. We didn't have the insulation of, the things around us when we were in Chicago. And there I was all alone, like in this new place with no support system, having to figure out what I was going to do with my new life. And here's the kicker: I was a therapist. So I should know better, right? And near I like sat in this analysis paralysis. And I did the work and I did everything in the traditional sense that you were supposed to do, yet I still couldn't get out of my own way. And there was no way I could have been a therapist, quite honestly, in that moment, because if anyone were to come to me, I would have said, you think you have issues? Let me go on a couch for a second. Cause I couldn't even
Well,
help myself.
let me sit down.
Yeah, yeah. Let me sit down. I couldn't help myself, let alone others. So I did something really untraditional one day after looking in the mirror and just being horrified at what I saw. I just saw this really frumpy mom that had lost her way. I was still wearing nursing bras. It wasn't nursing any longer. Flip flops. Yeah, it just wasn't sexy. And I'm like, how am I supposed to go out there and date looking like this? Even though I've done all this work inside, my outside wasn't matching.
Mhm.
So I go shopping. This is where everything changed in my business. I go shopping and I'm picking out all the things that I normally picked out. I think I'm up leveling myself. No, I'm picking all the black clothes. They're all on my arms. And this personal shopper, she came up to me and she says, "Ma'am, I've been watching you and I really think you should try this on." And she holds up this red dress that looked like 3 sizes too small. I said, "That's really sweet of you, but that's really not my size. And that is so not my color." She says, "Honey, that is your size. That is your color. Try
Yeah.
it on." I was like, dun, dun, dun. There's people in your life that kind of come in where you really hear it. Like if I had met her even 3 months prior, I probably wouldn't have heard her in the way that I heard her in that moment. And it's almost like she hit me over the head with this red dress. I call it my red dress moment where everything changed. And I decided to slip in it, twirl around like Cinderella, and bam, there I was, this and I remember thinking I looked like a princess, and I hadn't seen myself in so long. And I'm like, wow, like this is what's been missing.
Yeah.
Doing something in action, viscerally feeling a different thing. And then I moved out into the world in that red dress, and I kid you not, that's where everything started happening. Like, men started noticing me, I started getting new opportunities. But then there was a conversation about that, right? Because I had to get used to being seen.
Yeah.
And really, the black clothes were like, it was a cloak to keep me invisible from you alien men because I was scared.
Ah,
That's really what was going on, and I didn't realize it at the time until I started getting all these feelings around being seen, and so I did first just get used to that,
yeah.
and then I had to learn how to talk to you aliens, and that, like, and then it went on and on, and down my yellow brick road I went, and I kept collecting tools in my little basket, and I'm still on the quest for Oz, right? Like, we never really get to Oz. It's just there's tools that we have along the way. And that's where I land now, because up until that point, I really believed you had to work from the inside out and to build confidence and find connections and love. And now I flip the script. I actually believe you have to work from the outside in order to do that, because it's the quickest gateway into our confidence. There's a symbiotic relationship between the outer and the inner when it comes to confidence.
Mhm.
And so this is where I start with people. And that's where the charisma quotient was born. It's the name of my podcast. It's the formula that I use. And we work on these three pillars. And whether I'm working with someone in business or in love, it's the same thing. It's working on your style intelligence, your emotional intelligence, and your social intelligence. And we can talk about those pillars a little bit if we want to, but I believe that it's like a puzzle, just figuring out what pieces are missing in each of those areas to really make someone feel whole and get results.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Wow. Yeah. This is really, I mean, because you're right. I've I've had these experiences where all of a sudden I got this immense amount of clarity. And I've experienced it enough now that I know what it feels like when that shift, like your red dress moment, that was a
Right.
big shift. And so now that you've experienced that, anytime you have an experience like that again, you can totally recognize it, like, oh, this just happened again. And I don't know what's going to come from this exactly, but I've experienced this before. I've felt this before. I can recognize this. And so when we have those red dress moments, if you will, it does. And it comes with a whole lot of confidence too, because we realize who the heck we really are. And
Yeah.
yeah, wow.
Yeah. Well, it's no different than marketing and business. And this is what really lands for a lot of people in the business world. It's like, we can pay attention to all the back end stuff, right? The SEO, the funnels, all the knowledge that you have in your business, and as people, sometimes we put so much focus on that inside stuff that's going on. And quite honestly, it's a longer game. But if you're not marketing or advertising the knowledge you have and who you are as a person, then you literally you're missing opportunity with connections, with relationships,
Yeah.
all of it.
Yeah.
And so it's not superficial, like what we see is how we get judged and how we trust and how we move on with people. And so that's why I love working on people's wardrobes and body language. And it's like the energy that people generate, because that is the first thing that we see. So first impressions are huge. It's a huge part of dating and business.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay. So, Kimmy, now that we've got a little bit of context set here, I'm going
Yes.
to switch gears a little bit. So, I'm going to reiterate the question for the benefit of the listeners. Have you ever been introduced to a person or persons that completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons? And Kimmy, I am just really excited to hear your story, your experience around this, and hear about some of the relationships in your life that have been so impactful.
Oh my God, do I have to pick one?
You do whatever feels right
Yeah.
to you in this moment, Kimmy.
Well, because and we talked a little bit off air. It's hard for me to pinpoint one particular
Yeah.
person because, truth be told, I was a trained therapist. I never got training in business. And so I really have made my business possible through the relationships that I've had because that's what I knew. I knew how to build relationships. I knew how to make connections, but this other stuff just tripped me up. And so what I found along the way, there were some people who were instrumental who I built really strong relationships with that carried me to the next thing. And so I was
Okay.
saying it's like the game leapfrog, like one person led to the next to the next. But what I will say, and I'll pick maybe some key players here,
Sure.
is that it actually started with my father. I
Okay.
mean, I'm gonna go way back, who had his own high-end shoe store, and I used to work there as a little girl, and that's where I kinda learned the art of business and, entrepreneurship, but I didn't know it at the time. Like, who knew that I would have to draw upon that experience, fast forward to my life?
Yeah.
But I realized, even the fashion piece and the business, like, wow, I actually got that from my dad. And so that's been a cool thing to think about. And he passed when I was young. So I love that he's a part of me through this whole journey. And then, obviously being a therapist, I mean, I just worked in a traditional kind of 9 to 5 job. I mean, I was in the hospitals for a while, that I worked in, the schools. So I just think every experience I had, was a great one. But the whole entrepreneur thing, oh my god, like, that was super scary. Like, wait, people are gonna pay me lots of money to just help them? Like, I couldn't get that, like, switch from my mind. So that was also a journey in overcoming, like, the money thing and putting value to what I do and what I help people with. And I know a lot of entrepreneurs who are in the helping industry struggle with this.
Yeah.
And I would say that a key player who helped me with that was another dating coach. His name was David Wygant, and he was kind of a veteran in the space. He coached men, and somebody put me in touch with him. And after going through my red dress moment and figuring out what I wanted to do with my life, uh, they said, "You got to talk to David. Like, he needs you and you need him." And I met him at a boot camp with 20 other men. And he's like, "Who's going in Seltzer's car?" And away I went. Like, I suddenly became this dating coach in an instant. And that's where I learned marketing and, that I wanted to do something similar and help not just men, but women too. And I can incorporate my therapy. And then I hired an image consultant who was another key player in this story. Her name was Ashley Rothschild, and she has passed since, but she was the #1 LA image consultant here. And I shadowed her and I learned how to do makeovers. And so, again, skipping along the yellow brick road, there's all kinds of people I met, who gave me these advice. But I would say those are the three that really kind of got me started.
Yeah. I didn't know that. It's interesting. My dad passed away when I was just 16. And
Me too.
were you 16 when your
I was
dad passed?
16
Wow.
too. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, he got diagnosed with cancer at the beginning of my ninth grade year and passed away at the end of my 10th grade year, 18 months later. And
Wow.
that
Similar.
was a really not easy as a kid to watch your dad just slowly deteriorate. Like, well, not even that slowly, really. 18 months is pretty quick, and but I'll tell you, I was incredibly grateful for all the conversations that I got to have with my dad over those 18 months. And when he did pass away, it was more like a weight lifted because now he's finally out of his pain, and
Yeah.
but yeah, you're right. I mean, now anytime I hear from anybody else who lost their father at a younger age, it always just immediately just clicks with me, because you have that in common, and
Totally.
there's so many commonality, and even what you were sharing with, about David and about Ashley, these commonalities that you guys had. And because that's what brings us together, that's what binds us, that's what causes us to just start having conversations and exploring. And so, you know, I'm going to ask a little bit of a question, because you've talked about your dad, you've talked about David, you've talked about Ashley, and you brought up three key people in your life here. Although, you've also alluded to, man, there's a whole lot more too. But if we look at these three people, and I just want to, like, if we look at one of these three relationships in your life,
Mhm.
and that, if you look back on those, what is something really substantial that came from any one of these three relationships, where because of your relationship with this person, you guys got to make a really big impact in the world together, that would have never happened if not for your relationship with this person. And I'm just curious to, like, dig into that with you a little bit, Kimmy, because
Yeah.
it really demonstrates the power of these relationships.
No, it's huge because like you could hire people to be like a business coach. You can, take a course and you'll get still a lot out of that. But when you have a special relationship where you're actually like shadowing someone or learning and they kind of put you under their wing, so to speak, that was probably the best training I could have ever gotten. I mean, honestly, all three of them, but I do have to do a shout out to David, only in the sense is that like he really kind of taught me more the business side of things,
Okay.
and that how you can actually help people and have a business at the same time. Because like to me, it was like almost separate in my
Okay.
head.
Okay.
Mind you, this is years ago before there were a lot of love coaches. Now of course there's a ton. Um, and so from doing like videos to, you know, putting myself out there in ways that I never thought I could, to going on the streets and helping guys flirt with women. Like I can make a business out of this. Like who knew? And all the things that I loved and the joy, and I have an improv background too, that I'm like, oh my God, and we can play improv games and get them loose and have that, like it like synthesized all the things that I love. And he was able to teach me how to incorporate that in a business and have that money conversation and demand more.
Yeah. 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 That's huge, because, like, you're right. I think as entrepreneurs, and I've certainly been guilty in the past, is we tend to undervalue ourselves,
Mhm.
and undervalue the real, what the real gifts and the talents and the skills that we bring to the table. And the more that we can realize that, it's the bigger impact that we get to have in this world.
Well, and along those lines, because this is part of what I'm talking about this week at the conference, is that a lot of entrepreneurs' identity gets wrapped up in the success of the business. And that could mean whatever they accomplish money wise. It could be a project that they did, their name getting out there. And that's why sometimes dating and relationships get really hard, because they forget who they are as a person and the value that they bring as a person.
Yeah,
And again, at the end of the day, it is about who you are and how people feel around you more than the facts and the money that you can bring them. And I
absolutely.
think that's just super important with everything that we're talking about.
Yeah, yeah. Kimmy, I really appreciate you sharing what you did today. And for anybody that's listening to this going, dang, Kev, I really like Kimmy. I love because I know as soon as you and I got connected, as soon as Joe and had sent that email and connected you and I watched your TED talk, I sent you an email. I'm like, oh my gosh, Kimmy, I love the way you show up, man. And I'm sure there are a lot of people right now feeling the same way that are listening to this. So for anybody that is feeling that way, and it's like, man, how do I find out more about Kimmy and the work that she does? How can they do that, Kimmy?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's really easy. I mean, my website is kimmyseltzer.com. It's KIMMYSELTZER, as in Alka Seltzer. That's not my family. I wouldn't be here if that was my family. I can't claim that. And all my socials are at Kimmy Seltzer, so it's super easy. And I would like to actually give your listeners a free gift because, we didn't really touch upon all the nitty gritty stuff that I do with people. But whether you're looking for love or improve your image in business, it's often a thing that's overlooked. And I have a free style guide for both men and women that you can grab. And it really, for women, understanding their body type and what colors and what clothes flatter their figure, what clothes to stay away from. And for men, I do the same with their body type, but it's called a man's fashion manifesto because men secretly do need and want to know fashion tips, but it's not like something that you talk about with each other on a Sunday
Sure.
afternoon. And so I go over grooming tips as well. And you can go to kimmyseltzer.com/style to grab that.
Okay.
So I would love to help anybody. I do virtual makeovers. I do like all kinds of, different things. It just depends on what people are looking for.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I'll make sure my assistant gets that included with the show notes for this too and stuff. And so, well, Kimmy, any last thing that you want to share before we call it a wrap here today?
I would just say, the biggest thing that I learned through this journey is, a lot of entrepreneurs, especially, we're very outcome driven and oriented. And
Yeah.
it's good to set goals, and obviously that's why we're good at that. But that can also sometimes crash and burn when it comes to love and relationships and being present with people and building relationships. And so in order to stay present, I always tell people it's those small wins, it's the like micro transactions with people that end up actually leading to the bigger win in the end.
Yeah.
And to really stay present. And so if it's one little thing that you can tweak or change or edit that could make a big impact in how you feel about yourself, that's where all the magic happens. Because in the end of the day, it really isn't about anybody else but you.
Yeah.
And when you love you, that's when other people do too.
That's right. That's right. Well, Kimmy, once again, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation. I'm really excited to share this with other entrepreneurs, other founders, other CEOs. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. It was so good to be here.